Hi everyone. Welcome to your digital drawing classes for this year. Obviously it's a new look course, or a new form of delivery at least, for this year as a result of coronavirus. This year all of the lessons will be delivered online instead of face-to-face as they normally are. Now that may give us a few extra challenges when we're trying to learn new software and learn how to use a computer to draw, but I also hope that it gives us a few opportunities to allow every student to learn at a pace that works for them. Hopefully the way that these lessons are delivered allows you to pause, to rewind and to rewatch lessons, which I think is a key component of being able to learn how to use new software to do architectural drawings digitally. This year we'll be looking at a series of softwares. We will be focusing to begin with on AutoCAD, which is a computer-aided design 2D piece of software. And then as the course continues, we will be looking at other pieces of software that allow us to do some of the drawings that you can see on your screen at the moment. Not necessarily to this level of completion by the end of this course, but the hope is that this course allows everybody to have a basic understanding of key pieces of software that can be used to begin using computers to develop architectural drawings. So we'll be having 10 lessons over the next 10 weeks, not accounting for reading week and mud shoot, so the lessons may last a little bit longer than 10 weeks. During the 10 lessons, we'll be looking at the following. So we'll be beginning with AutoCAD, and as you can see, we'll be spending 4 weeks looking at AutoCAD. We think that AutoCAD is a good piece of software to begin with in terms of starting a journey to using digital drawing as part of your architectural degree. And then after we have hopefully gone into some detail with AutoCAD, we'll then start looking at 3D modeling software, so SketchUp. And then we will be looking at the Adobe suite of softwares. So the principal Adobe softwares are InDesign. We can use this to set up portfolios and template documents. We'll be then looking at Photoshop, which obviously we can use to create atmospheric drawings. And then finally, we'll be looking at Illustrator. And we can use that to create vector-based drawings, so drawings that do not pixelate and are based upon lines. And then finally, we'll be looking at a recap of the entire year. So in terms of an introduction to digital drawing, I think that it is important to say that there are, in general, 2 types of drawing. So there are drawings that try to communicate an idea of space and scale, and there are drawings that attempt to communicate ideas, concepts and atmosphere. So you can see on the left we have a drawing that is aiming to communicate measured space, and then on the right we have a plan that is looking at communicating an idea of texture, an idea of materiality. When we are working with drawings that are trying to communicate measured space and scale, it's important that those drawings are accurate and are measurable. Hence, using a piece of software like AutoCAD, which can be very accurate and measured. And obviously when we're looking at doing drawings that communicate a concept or an idea or an atmosphere, then we're free from the constraints of creating measured drawings, and we can use pieces of software like Illustrator, SketchUp and Photoshop to create more conceptual types of drawing. So here are 2 more examples of drawings one that is broadly looking at measured, accurate space, and one that tries to communicate an idea of, for example, materiality, daylight, views, form, 3D space and atmosphere. So lesson 1 is looking at AutoCAD. So there are broadly 3 or 4 types of CAD software. We have AutoCAD, and within AutoCAD there are pieces of software like AutoCAD LT, which is AutoCAD Lite, which I think would be very, very sufficient for what you will be doing. And then we also have Revit, which is a 3D type of AutoCAD. We can talk about BIM, which is Building Information Modeling, which is 3D CAD software a little bit later on in this course. But for now, I think that it's sufficient to focus on 2D drawing. There's also a piece of software called MicroStation, which again has a 2D version and a 3D version. And then there is Vectorworks and AutoCAD, which is a 3D BIM piece of software. All of these roughly do the same thing. And whether you choose to use AutoCAD or MicroStation or Vectorworks or AutoCAD, you will more or less get the same result at the end. It's like choosing between a Mac and a PC. They do broadly the same thing, but they do them slightly differently. We found over the past few years that the majority of students, like the majority of architects, use AutoCAD, and therefore we have chosen to focus on that for this bunch of lessons. So if we're going to look at AutoCAD today and for the next 4 weeks, then I think the first thing to do is to ask ourselves, what can AutoCAD do? AutoCAD does very simple drawings. So we are looking at doing 2-dimensional drawings. If we think of plans, sections, elevations, they're the things that we will be doing mostly within AutoCAD. So within AutoCAD, you're able to draw lines, you're able to draw simple shapes, you're able to trim and cut lines, move lines and copy lines. And by using these simple actions, drawing a line, copying a line, moving a line, slowly but surely, as you go through these tools in various combinations, you're able to build up what becomes a complex plan or a complex drawing. So today we will look at an introduction to the model space, which will begin to make more sense as soon as we shift onto the AutoCAD screen. We will look at the tools. So there's broadly 2 groups of tools that we can use. There are drawing tools and modifying tools. Again, hopefully that will make sense as we move through today's lesson. We'll look at different properties and what they mean, and then we will be looking at drawing guides that can help us draw accurately. Then we will start looking at how we draw to scale in AutoCAD. So something that is different to drawing by hand is that in AutoCAD you always draw at full scale. So if you have a building that is 20 meters long, in AutoCAD you draw a 20-meter line, and we do all of the scaling right at the end when we print. And then we'll be looking at using some of the tools. Line tool, I'll show you how to use a line tool to create exact lengths of lines. How to start and end using a tool, which sounds like a very simple thing, but AutoCAD and successful use of AutoCAD depends upon understanding what order to click things in order to make them work properly. Then we'll be looking at a couple of things that sound quite alien, but are very simple subjects that help us draw well within AutoCAD. So polar tracking, and object snaps. Again, all of this will make sense as we go through, I hope. Polyline, the difference between a line and a polyline. One of the things that you may know about AutoCAD is that instead of clicking on the tools all of the time, like you do with other pieces of software, you're able to type in little shortcuts to be able to make the drawing process quicker. We'll be looking at zooming, so how we can zoom in and out of what we're drawing on the screen. And then we'll be looking at selections. Again, it sounds like a very simple thing, but there are a couple of things that we can learn to make selecting objects easier. And then we'll be looking at the final few principal tools, which are move, copy, mirror, offset, and trim. And then finally we will save our drawing for today, so that we can open it up next week and use it again. So that is everything for this little presentation. What we're going to do now is to open up AutoCAD. So I've already drawn something here to help illustrate what we're going to do today. But what you can do, if you open up your AutoCAD, you can see I have AutoCAD 2017. They're very similar, so it doesn't matter if you have AutoCAD 2015, AutoCAD 2017, 2020, or whether it says LT. They're all going to be very similar, and they'll all be sufficient for today. So the first thing that we can do is start a new drawing, and you do that by clicking on File, New Drawing. And it should, when you click on this, it should give you a number of options. If we just click on ACAD, which is a drawing template, and press open, your screen should look like this. Now it's worth saying that I'm using a MacBook in order to use AutoCAD. So my AutoCAD looks like this, with tools right along this side and with properties on the right. If you're using a PC, then there's a chance that all of your tools may be across the top here. That is all the major differences that there are. All of these little icons which indicate what tools are all look very similar. So hopefully there shouldn't be too many differences between the workspaces. So when I say workspace, I'm talking about this entire screen. So this is the workspace that we'll be using for AutoCAD. The first thing to maybe mention is this big black space in the middle. This space is technically, if your computer is big enough and powerful enough, this space is infinite. So this space is as big as you need it to be for your building or whatever you're going to draw. If I now have a quick look at some of the principles of the workspace. So here we have all of our tools. So on the left-hand side we have a panel full of tools. If for whatever reason this isn't visible, if you go to the window menu here, you can click Tool Sets, and that makes them disappear because they were already open, and if they're not open, then that should make them appear. And similarly with Properties, if the Properties, which is this here, it tells you what color the line is going to be, what layer it's on, what line type it is. We'll go through all of that later on in the module. If none of this is visible, then you should be able to find the set that you need here within Window. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through some of the very basic tools. So here we have a group of tools. There are 12 here. These are the drawing tools. So you can see if you hover over them, it tells you what the tool is. This is a line tool, polyline tool. This is drawing a rectangle. This is creating an arc. What else do we have? We have drawing an a spline, which is a kind of a squiggly shape as opposed to a line. And then we have things like creating a single point or a construction line. So Here you should see all of your draw tools. As well as draw tools, we have modifying tools. So I mentioned right at the introduction of this lesson that the way that we create more complex drawings within AutoCAD is that we create something quite simple like a line, and then we may copy it over in order to create a wall. I'll go through this more slowly in the very near future, but we've drawn a very simple line. We can copy it in order to create something like a wall. We can draw another line in order to create a room. So we can select it again, and let's say we can copy it again, and now we have 2 columns possibly. But we use very simple actions, and then we modify those actions using this little palette here in order to slowly but surely create more complex drawings. I'm going to delete those because we're going to start our drawing very shortly. So we have, in the modifying palette, we have copy, mirror, rotate. So all of these should be quite self-explanatory. We have trim, which means cutting a line, and then we have offset, which is something that we will do in the near future. And then we have more complex tools like array and stretch and scale. So we will use all of these in this week and next week's lessons. So that's the tool menu here. You can see I've got lots of other tools, but it's worth saying that on a daily basis, as a practicing architect, I think I probably use maybe 3 of these tools, which is Polyline, rectangle, maybe arc, and then I use copy, mirror, rotate, fillet, offset, stretch, and scale. So I probably use 10 of these tools on a daily basis, and all of the others are slightly more niche and barely get used for an architectural drawing. So even though there are lots here that may look quite complicated, as soon as we learn the first 5, 6, 7, or 8 of them, we should be able to create complex drawings. And then the last thing to look at in terms of tools and properties is this panel here. So this will begin to make more sense with lesson 3 and 4, but just in terms of letting you have a broad understanding of how the workspace works at the moment. This is where we can choose the color of the line. This is where we can choose the layer. This is where we can choose whether it is a line or whether it's dashed. And we can even choose things like the transparency of the line. So that's where we get our properties. And then if we go right down to this bottom right-hand corner, there are lots of little tabs, and again, like with everything else, there are lots of tabs, but there are 2 or 3 that are most useful. We have something here called polar tracking, which is very useful. We have something here that allows us to see what information we're inputting on a line when we do it. And then we have snaps, so object snaps. When we're drawing something and we want it to be very accurate, the benefit of using AutoCAD is that we know that something is going to be accurate. And obviously, as architects, we want to be able to do drawings that can be passed over to builders, and builders can have confidence in the information to build it accurately. So one of the benefits of using AutoCAD is that we can ask our lines to snap and attach to other lines, so that we know that an object is properly drawn. And then if we have a look at this workspace again, the last thing that's worth repeating is that we draw our buildings, we do our drawings at 1:1, which means that if I want to draw the room I'm in, and I'm in a room that's 3 meters by 3 meters, then within this space, we draw lines that are 3 meters long by 3 meters. And we do all of the scaling later on when we want to print. Okay, so I think that's a good enough introduction to the workspace as a whole. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at some simple tools, and we're going to talk about how to use them. Again, I think that I said previously that one of the ways that you can successfully use AutoCAD is to know when to click and when to hit enter. That will all begin to make sense, but don't feel embarrassed about repeating and pausing and rewinding and playing this part again to get the order of the clicks correct in order to use the tools properly. So the first thing that we're going to use is the line tool, which is up here in my top left hand corner. If we click on it, you can see that the tool is now active, and if we look just below the crosshair, AutoCAD is really good in that it gives you the instructions, so it tells you how to use every single tool. So here it says specify the first point, and we do that by clicking. So we've already clicked our tool, we've come into the workspace, which is where we're going to start drawing, and to begin drawing we just click. And now you can see if I move my mouse to the right, the line has started to move to the right. If I move my mouse to the left, the line has started to move to the left, again with up and down. So you specify your first point, and then you can see that as I make this line shorter, the number in the box gets smaller, and as I make it longer, the number in the box gets bigger. That's because that is the length of the line in millimeters. So at the moment, this line is 25 and a bit millimeters. So that's 2.5 centimeters in real life. Before you have made any other clicks, so all we've done is first click to create the line. If you push the line in the direction you want it to go, so I want my line to be in this direction, and let go of the mouse. If you now go to your keyboard and type in a length, so let's say I want my line to be 2 meters, I can type in 2, 0, 0, 0. Remember, this is in millimeters, so that's 2,000 millimeters. And then if I press enter and zoom out, quite a long way, that is a 2 meter line that I've just drawn. Now you can see as I've carried on, the line tool is still active. If I want to draw another line, I can. And I can just carry on drawing. If I want to stop at any point, I just hit enter. And that stops me using the tool. So I have a 2 meter line, and then I have lots of other lines that I've just created. Now you can see by hovering this selector, this crosshair, over the line that I've drawn, it goes brighter in order to show that it is under the crosshair. And then if I click my mouse, that's how I select that line. You can see, because I've used the line tool, each of these lines is selectable separately. Now, at the moment, that doesn't really matter, that doesn't make any difference, but as we begin to draw more complex things, that will begin to be something that's important. So in order to delete things, you can go all the way down to the modify tool here. There's a little eraser, so you can click the eraser tool and it will delete things. Press enter when you've finished, and they've all been deleted. The alternative, I'll just go onto the line tool again, so click line, and then come into the workspace. First click to start the line, second click to finish the line, and then when I've finished using the tool, I hit enter, and that means the tool has stopped and being active. Instead of pressing erase over here, I can also just click the line and press delete, and that will get rid of the line as well. So, line tool, first click uses it, second click finishes you drawing the first line. If I want to stop using the line tool, I can hit enter. If I want to restart using the last tool that I have just used, I can hit enter again, and I can carry on using the line tool. And to end it, I hit enter. So that is the most basic tool that we're going to use in AutoCAD. And I think at this moment, if you're all able to just click on the line tool and play with the line tool, so that you begin to feel comfortable with that tool, then I think that that's a good thing to do. The next thing to mention is, if I just move over to the line tool again for the 5th or 6th time, click it to start using it, you can see that when I push in certain directions, there is a green dashed line. And when I move off those certain directions, the line vanishes. As I go towards 45 degrees, again, the green dashed line appears and the line snaps to that angle. And then as I come off it, it disappears again. As I go to 90 degrees, again, the dashed line appears. That is called polar tracking. I'm just going to press escape to stop using this tool here. I pressed escape because I hadn't drawn a line. I'd started using the tool, but I didn't want to do anything with it, so I pressed escape. Now, polar tracking is down in this right-hand corner. In order to make sure that it's turned on, you click this little symbol. You can see that if I turn it off and I try and draw, suddenly there are no snaps. Nothing is, there are no green dashed lines, which isn't very helpful when you're trying to draw a building that has very straight defined lines. So again, I'm going to press escape. If I click on this little symbol again, I turn on polar tracking, which means that now when I try and draw a line, very helpfully, it tells me when my lines are at perfect vertical, horizontal, and 45 degrees. Escape. If I right click on this little polar tracking symbol, you can see that I have it enabled, first of all, and I've chosen what angles polar tracking works at. So what angles those green dashed lines will be visible. So you can see if I turn it to 10 degrees and try and draw a line again, every 10 degrees this line will appear. Now, I find that a little bit too frequent for me, and I don't know whether this says anything about my architectural style, but I tend to find that 90 degrees, 45 degrees, and 0 is all I need. So if I press escape again to stop using the line tool, I come over to my polar tracking and right click. I can choose 45 instead of 10, and that means that now my polar tracking will be working every 45 degrees. The other thing that's really helpful is object snap. So you can see here, if I try and draw a line, now that I have these two lines visible, if I try and draw another line and I hover near this line, the line tool has snapped to the end of the line that I've already drawn. And you can see that it's snapped because there's a little green box that's appeared. That means that if I click now and I start drawing, the two lines, this line and this line, are perfectly connected. And as well as at the end, if I hover the line over, it will also snap in the middle. The little triangle means you're at the midpoint. So if I click there, and then I'm going to hit enter, you can see that this line and this line meet perfectly at the center of the longer line. That's called object snapping. And the way that I've just pressed escape so that these two lines are no longer highlighted. Escape. The way that I can turn that on and off, I would suggest keeping it on because it's very useful. The way that I can turn it on and off is by clicking this, so it's off, and now that it's gone dark, it means it's on. And as with polar tracking, if you right click, you have a lot of variables that you can choose. So this is a matter of personal choice, and whatever you feel works best for you. I think that snapping to the end is really useful. Snapping to the middle is often very useful. Snapping to the center of a circle when we draw them is very useful. Snapping to a node, which is a small point, less useful, but it's good to have it. Snapping at an intersection, so when two lines cross over, sometimes in a building, when we're drawing a building, that crossover is significant. I would say it's always significant because it's when either two walls come together or two different materials come together. So snapping at an intersection I find very useful. And also snapping perpendicular. So if we're drawing an angle and we want to know where one line would hit another, snapping at perpendicular is also very useful. Sometimes snapping at nearest can be useful as well. So maybe play around with these. You can click them on and off and see how the snaps work and feel for you. So that is the line tool up here. And then we've also looked at polar tracking and how that can help us draw accurately, and also the snaps and how they can help us draw accurately. The next thing to think about is the next basic tool, which is next to the line, and that's Polyline here. So if we click on it, it works exactly the same way as a line would in terms of starting the process. Click on the tool, come into the workspace, specify the start point as the command is asking us to do, click, and then you're able to draw a shape, whatever shape you want. And if we hover towards the end, you'll see it snaps. And as soon as I want to stop using the tool, I can hit enter, and I've stopped using my Polyline tool. Now, on the face of it, there aren't big differences between the line tool, which is here, and the Polyline tool. But if we hover over these lines, which have been drawn with the line tool, you can see that they're all separate. They're all different lines, and they're highlighted separately. So if I want to select this line, only that line is selected. And if I want to select all of these lines here, I have to go through and click each one of them individually. So as you can imagine, when your drawing starts to get quite complicated, that's quite a lot of work. I need to press escape. But you can see with the Polyline tool, all of the lines have stayed joined together, which can be really helpful when you're drawing walls, when you're drawing buildings, and you may want to, for example, move them, or to copy something, or rotate something. Instead of having to select everything one by one, we can select everything that's been drawn with a polyline at the same time. So I would say that on a day-to-day basis, doing the drawings that I do as an architect, I never use line tool. I always use Polyline tool. Right. Something that is very simple, or feels potentially very simple, but isn't, is the selection. So you can see we have this little crosshair that's within our workspace. For a simple thing like a line, you can hover over it, it is highlighted, and we click, and that shows that the item has been selected. I'm going to press escape to deselect. Another way of thinking about selection is by clicking the arrow anywhere in the workspace, and you can see that you have a box selection. So you can see it's blue when we go from left to right, and when we go from right to left, it turns into green. So it's blue from left to right, and it's green from right to left. Now there's a big difference here, and it's worth knowing as we start on this journey rather than later on. When a box is blue, so when it's left to right, watch what happens with the lines and the shapes. You have to go all the way over a line or a shape. So the entire line or shape has to be within the blue box in order for it to be highlighted and selected. So again, we can see the whole thing needs to be within the blue box in order for it to be selected. And as you can see, the strange shape that we drew with the polyline, not all of it is within the box, and therefore it's not been selected. So if I click now, we've selected everything that was completely within the blue box. Now if we escape and we go click and then we go right to left, anything that touches the green box, so anything that touches a right to left selection gets selected. You can see here, as soon as this line is touching the green one, it gets selected. As soon as these lines are touching the green one, they get selected. So it's good to know the difference between these two. And this rule tends to happen, or tends to exist for every piece of software. So if you select something from left to right, you have to cover the entire thing before it gets selected. And if you go from right to left, as soon as you touch it, it becomes a selected object, which you can then copy, move, mirror, delete. Okay, so I am going to now talk briefly about zooming. So it's something that I've been doing lots without talking about. It's because it's relatively intuitive. The zooming is controlled by the scroll wheel on your mouse, or if you have an Apple Magic Mouse, then it's just the center of the mouse. And you can zoom by just scrolling in and out on your mouse. And if I want to zoom out, the zoom happens from wherever your mouse is pointed. So if I want to zoom into the corner of this triangle, I put my mouse over the corner of this triangle, zoom in, and it's going to take me towards the point that I want. And the same works with zooming out. So I zoom out from the point where my mouse is. So look, if I put my mouse over in this corner and zoom out, it goes that way. If I put my mouse over in this corner and zoom out, it will go that way. So it's a relatively intuitive thing, and all you have to remember is that you have to point the mouse where you want to go and then zoom in or zoom out. There is also a shortcut that we can use in order to zoom. So we'll look at shortcuts next. If we hover over all of these tools, you can see that you see the name of the tool, and then it also says command line. So the command is the shortcut. So you can just type line and then on your keyboard and press enter, and the line tool will appear. You can also use a shortcut, which is L. So if we just type L and then enter, the line tool has appeared. I'm going to press enter again to stop using it. If we want to draw a polyline, then the shortcut is PL. So I've just typed PL into the keyboard, and then I press enter, and now the polyline tool has been started. Hit enter. As a good shortcut for zooming is to be able to type in Z, and then that's zoom. So Z, enter, and then E, enter, and that zooms to the extent of what you have drawn. So that's a good shortcut when it comes to zooming. In terms of shortcuts, you will tend to not necessarily remember them right at the beginning of this course, but as you carry on drawing, the shortcuts will become more and more embedded within your brain, and you'll start to use them a little bit more, I suspect. So we've looked at line and polyline. So they're the only two drawing tools that we're going to look at today. What we're going to look at next are some modifying tools. So you can see we've drawn something, And then the next part of the AutoCAD setup is that we modify things. So today we're going to look at the principal modifying tools, which are Move, which is here, and then we're going to look at Move, Copy, Mirror, Offset, and Trim. And then we will save what we have done today. So the first thing is to say that when you want to modify something, the first thing that you have to do is you have to tell AutoCAD what thing you want to modify. So if you want to move something, you first have to tell AutoCAD what you want to move, and you do that by selecting it. So I want to move this line. So the first thing that I do is I select the line, and then I go over to this toolbar, or I can type in the shortcut, which for move is M, enter, and now I can move by clicking. I can move it, and you can see the polar snaps, the polar tracking still works, which is very helpful when trying to move something. And then in order to stop moving, click the mouse again, and we've moved an object. You can do that with a line, or you can do that with a polyline. So you can imagine if this is a piece of furniture in a plan and I want to move it, I go over, I select the object. So I've told AutoCAD what I want to move, and then I can go over and I can press move, I can press copy. Here we go. If I click copy, it's telling me to specify the base point, so that's where I want to start from. And then I can copy. I can do that as many times as I want. And in order to stop using that tool, remember you press enter. I'm now going to select using the right to left selection. You can see why it's useful to be able to use that tool. Click and delete. So we've looked at moving an object and we've looked at copying. So the shortcut for copy is CO, hit enter. I can copy that. You see I did that in a slightly different order, slightly more convoluted. The best way is still to select the object and then type in CO, enter, and then you can copy. You press escape to stop. So that's move and copy. And now the next thing to look at is mirror. So you can imagine mirroring an object is, instead of copying or rotating, we're flipping an object. So I'm going to use the right to left in order to select all of these objects. Now we go over to the modify panel. We can hover over mirror. And now you can see that it's telling you to specify the first point of the mirror line. So I'm going to go here and then specify the second point of the mirror line. And you can see that if I make the, imagine that there's a mirror that we're placing on the plan. The mirror is the line that we're creating. You can see that I can flip all of those lines. Now I have it as a perfect vertical line at the moment, but if I move my cursor, you can see that it's moving the mirror. So it's flipping the lines in different ways, but I tend to find that in 99% of cases, you will either want to flip something perfectly horizontally or perfectly vertically. And when you're finished, when it's in the place that you want it to be, click. And then in order to finish using this tool, it gives you two options. Do you want to erase the source objects, which is the original group of lines, or do you want to keep them? So if I press no, then both objects will stay. So we've got the original group and we've got the new group. And if I have pressed yes, so I'm going to just do that again. Here's my line, click, and then if I either hover over yes or type Y in the keyboard for yes and hit enter, it's flipped it and it's erased the original lines. So that is mirror. Now there are two more tools that we're going to look at, and then we're going to do some practice drawing with the tools that we've looked at today. The first tool is offset. So it's one of these modifying tools. This is very useful when we're thinking of drawing walls, for example. We can click on it, and now it says specify offset distance. Or, and in order to see the alternatives, you can press your little down arrow on your keyboard and the alternatives will appear. I'm going to press the up arrow to get rid of it because I want to specify how much we're going to offset our line by. And I'm going to choose the standard thickness of a wall, which is 300 millimeters. So when it says specify offset distance, I'm going to type in 300 and hit enter. And now it says select object to offset. So if I just hover over this shape, you can see that it's highlighted. As soon as it's highlighted, I can click. You can see that you can offset the shape by 300 millimeters. Now it would normally, if I push the cursor to the outside of the shape, the offset will be on the outside, and if I push the cursor on the inside of the shape, the offset will be internal. But because this shape is so small, 300 is a little bit too big a dimension to offset internally. So I'm going to press escape, and I am going to go back to my offset tool here. So I'm going to click offset. And now it says specify offset distance. So I'm going to choose a smaller distance to be able to show you the internal and external. So I'm going to press 100 and then hit enter. So that means that I'm now offsetting this line by 100 millimeters. Hover over the line, and now you can see if I put my cursor to the outside of the shape, it will offset externally. And if I push the cursor on the inside of the shape, it will offset internally. And you can do both. Click, click. You can see I can do that as many times as I need because the tool is still active. So that tool can be very useful when drawing walls or other objects. And then the last tool that we're going to look at right now is trim. And you can find trim here in the modify palette, or you can type in TR and hit enter, and that will create the trim. So I'm going to first draw some lines or find some lines that have a crossover in order for us to trim. I'm going to draw some lines here. So I zoomed in by using my scroll, and then I'm going to press PL in order to start drawing a line. Enter. I'm going to draw one line over here. Enter, because I've finished drawing my line. And in order to restart using the last tool that I used, I'm going to hit enter again and draw another line. Okay, so I'm going to imagine that this is a wall, this is a window or a doorway. So I want to delete this bit of the line, this bit of the line, this bit, and these two bits under here. The way that I do that is by using the trim tool. So the first thing that I would do is click over here. There are a few ways of doing it, but if we click on trim, it says select objects. So that means select the things that you want to trim. And when you finish selecting the things that you want to trim, hit enter. And now it says select object to trim. So you can see that I can now start selecting the things that I want to trim. And when I've finished trimming, hit enter. And I hope you can start to see how the simple actions that we have started using can begin to develop into something that is a plan. So we've looked at the draw tools up here. We've looked at the modify tools down here. We've had a brief look at properties, but we will look at that in more detail on another lesson. We've looked at polar tracking down in this corner. And then we've looked specifically at using the line tool and the polyline tool. Then we've looked at some shortcuts, how they're used, the difference between different types of selecting. So the blue selection, which is left to right, and then the green selection, which is right to left. And then we've looked at modifying tools, which is move, copy, mirror, offset, and trim. Okay, so we're going to try and use everything that we've gone through today next week in order to draw something that looks a little bit like this. So this is obviously a very simple plan, and we're going to try and use the line tool, the polyline tool, mirror, copy, trim, move, in order to draw a simple plan and this pond or lake next to it. So we will do all of this next week and hopefully put all of the tools that we've learned today into good use.